an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
Welcome in. It's On the Ledge, your Ontario politics podcast. Dave Trafford here with you, along with Keith Leslie from CH Television and the founder and editor and publisher of the Queen's Park Observer. Sabrina and Nanji is with us. And I got a question this morning. What's this ledge thing? And I have to remind people that it's a sort of an inside thing with the press gallery at Queen's Park. It's just slang for the legislature. So there's nobody sitting out ready to jump out windows. Nothing like that.
No, but the press gallery sits up on a ledge above the speaker. So
there you go. There is that, and they did equate us to the Muppets who sit around in the gallery there. And
I've had that before.
Yeah, for sure. just all of us sitting on the park bench feeding pigeons and bitching about politics. So, there's a lot going on here, but I want to start with the municipal elections. We now have two former progressive conservative leaders as mayors in the GTA. We have the former mayor of the Ontario Liberals as the mayor, and the former head of the NDP in Ontario as a mayor. And Sabrina, I'm hearing more and more, perhaps we're going to have the former mayor of Mississauga as the new leader of the Liberal Party in Ontario. So it's interesting to me how a lot of this provincial politics has really shifted to some of these, larger municipalities in the GTA, where that's really where work gets done.
Yeah, politics is a small world, I guess. And you're right, former NDP leader Andrea Horwath, eked out a narrow win over in Hamilton. I will note that October 24th, the day of municipal elections, was also her birthday. It was also Drake's birthday, so that was probably a nice birthday wish for her there. Stephen Del Duca, former Liberal leader, is now mayor of Vaughan. It was a close race there as well. So they both narrowly won another chance in politics after they had to resign after, poor showings in June. We don't really need to rehash all of that. But I think what's going to be interesting now is how these two former opposition leaders that were just hammering on Doug Ford, a couple months ago in June, on the campaign trail, are now going to be cozying up to him, if I can put it that way. I mean, we all know municipalities are creatures of the province. It's just the way our system is designed here, the way the Constitution is written. And so we also know that these two mayors are in line, with other bigger municipalities to get these strong mayor powers to fulfill the province's goal of, building more housing, a lot more housing. Maybe we can dig into that too, because we got a new bill on that this week. But I think now we'll probably be seeing Horwath and Del Duca playing a bit nicer with Premier Doug Ford in the province, because there's a lot of changes on the housing front coming. And I think, some of it's concerning for municipalities as well, but, down but not out over in the GTA.
Well, Keith, I think to Sabrina's point, oddly enough, having these former foes in the mayor's chairs, particularly in Hamilton and Vaughan, maybe even in Brampton, when we look at it that way, that it may actually accelerate his opportunities to create more affordable housing, particularly in the GTA.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, Horwath's biggest criticism during the campaign, and the reason I think it was so close against this relative newcomer, certainly to politics, the former Chamber of Commerce president, Keena Loomis, was the fact that, she was accused of not having delivered anything for Hamilton. Well, okay, here's a chance you can deliver. Hamilton desperately needs more affordable housing. The opponent in the mayor's race wanted to actually contract out the 50-odd million the province or the city spends on affordable housing. So that was a no-flyer as well. But she really can cooperate with Ford here on the housing issue. He wants it built. She desperately, as mayor, wants to deliver something that could be crucial. There was a fight. The previous council in Hamilton, the one that was just unelected, I guess, or his term expired, they had fought the province. The province wanted the city of Hamilton to expand its boundaries to have more housing. And they said, no, we can do it within our existing boundaries. We've got lots of room to intensify and create more housing. So it will be interesting to see where Horwath goes on that. But she will indeed, I think, look to quickly cooperate, especially on the housing file with Premier Ford. Mr. Del Duca, he pivoted just basically the day after he quit the election. He said, highways, that 413 that was going to kill us all. We in Vaughan need some highways. Holy cow, do we need some highways, and we need them now. So I think, again, that seems to certainly align with Mr. Ford's agenda. So, and, being in local politics here is a very different matter than being the provincial representative or the provincial Liberal leader at the time. So I think he's got a real chance here, again, to deliver for his town, to cooperate, and to show, he's already shown some extreme flexibility or spine removal. I don't know how you want to call it, but he's certainly being flexible, and that's what's needed now. It's at a different level. He's going to have to cooperate with Ford, certainly, and the Ford government to get along and to get what he needs for his town. Mayor Tory is already, former PC leader. He's already shown he can get along with this government, and I think he'll continue to do so. The fun one, of course, is Patrick Brown, which was just such a fun campaign to watch. And Brent, basically, there should have been a heck of a lot more interest in that campaign because of the alleged conflicts of interest and the report into it split. The Brampton City Council, the one that the term just expired, split evenly. Brown barely able to suppress this report into his conflicts. A city staffer is challenging him, and she ends up getting fired the day after the election. It's that old, quote from Omar: "If you come at the mayor or the king, you better not miss." And she did. But it was a fascinating thing, and that Brown ends up getting 60% of the vote. At the same time, during the campaign, or basically weeks before, he'd been kicked out of the federal Liberal leadership race, federal Conservative leadership race, because he just can't play by the rules. Doesn't matter what he's doing. He clearly can't play by the rules. And he manages to get it. There's still an investigation into some PC nominations when he was leader in 2017, these nominations. So he just never, ever plays by the rules, but he managed to come out. At 60% of this vote went his way. So it wasn't even close. It's going to be, as I say, fun to watch. I think he, again, can cooperate with the province. He wants a hospital. He'll be able to work with them on that. The real fun thing to watch is going to be the fallout from that, not just the firing of Ms. Kaur, but, of course, this proxy war that was going on behind the scenes between the PC strategist Nick Kouvalis and Warren Kinsella, the usually Liberal strategist, although he writes for The Sun, and they get into this really nasty, drag down, bitter fight. We're going to take you down the day after the election. Now coming after you, hardball. Apparently because Kinsella pointed out they'd actually misspelled Brampton on some of Nicky Kerr's signs. So I don't know where that's really going, but it was fun to watch. I mean, for the political insiders, and I have to believe you're an insider if you're listening to us talk about this kind of stuff. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I think all of these mayors, certainly the ones that were, the NDP and Liberals, they'll show they can really get along with Ford because they need to.
I wondered, I saw that playing out between Kouvalis and Kinsella online, but did anybody take Kouvalis's pulse after the election, Sabrina? Because the expectation fully was that he was going to bury Brown with Nicky Carr's campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any on the record stuff coming from that camp quite yet, but no, I mean, I think even some of the polling, like we were really surprised at there. And I mean, I think, Keith's right. This was just a really entertaining political grudge match to watch play out. There's no love lost between Patrick Brown and Doug Ford. There's still a lot of, political drama surrounding Brown, getting fined by the federal Conservatives for, potential wrongdoing on that end. So, I think Brown has proven he's got some kind of like political Teflon, like this standing power. I don't know what can take him down, if anything, despite that being the title of his book, about his time as PC leader and his ouster. But no, I think that's going to be fun to watch. Obviously now, housing is top of mind for everybody. And so I think because of the way our system is set up, in some ways, we're going to have to kind of put the politics aside from it. And we'll see a lot of, patting each other on the backs and cooperation happening because of this housing goal. It's a big
development fees are going to
ambitious plan. Yeah, I think
the development fees are going to be the big hang up issue. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mayors are already kind of coming together, saying you better make us whole, you better offset, what we're going to lose, getting rid of development charges. That actually, go towards funding things like roads, sewage systems, things like that. Like things that
Use your
residents
reserves.
need when you expand housing, of course. So I think the Ford government probably has some more explaining to do on if they will fully offset those costs, which I think the mayors are already sort of putting up a front to. So that might be the first battle, as Keith said.
Well, I mean, the government seemed to respond with, use your reserve funds to the municipalities. And I mean, and they pointed out the figure, I forget what it is, a grand total of reserve funds in all the municipalities, which, really isn't that much when you divide it up, 444 municipalities. But it comes from a government that's not surprising. It says use your reserve funds, because we just heard from the FAO, they've got reserve funds out the yahoo. I mean, holy cow. It used to be basically $1 billion a year, and maybe during crisis times, they'd have a separate reserve of another $1 billion. So $2 billion on an emergency situation would be a lot. $8 billion a year reserve and underspending all over the place. Sabrina will be better to talk to the details of the FAO's report, but just the high level stuff that, their tax revenues, corporate tax revenues are up like 40% personal income tax revenues up. Everything's up. They got a ton of money and they're not spending it. They're underfunding everything, healthcare, education, right across the board, apparently. So why we need $8 billion reserve funds seems extravagant, and seems, that okay, they're going to be able to say they're good fiscal managers, but if you don't spend it undersurfacing, the healthcare system is crumbling. Why aren't they spending some of that money?
Well, even at that, I mean, when we start to look at where are they spending it, and in healthcare, clearly, to say that it's staggered under its own weight is to understate what's going on there for sure. But just, down the street from Queen's Park, City Hall in Toronto is looking at nearly $1 billion gap in their budget. And where does that come from? You got to know that some of that has got to be coughed up at Queen's Park, as hard as it will be for Doug Ford to do that. They just can't run a deficit. We know that. So to start wagging a finger at the municipalities, telling them to, take care of your own fiscal.
Why cut the development fees? That's not what's hindering. What's that?
No,
that's taking revenue, and you're going to put it on the residential tax base? It's just nonsense. Developers are already getting a big enough break. They're sitting on land they want to develop. This is not taking away the development fees, which, as you point out, fund everything from infrastructure to parks. It's insane. And I know they want to cut out the red tape. Well, development fees aren't necessarily a red tape. They're a resource, a revenue source, and offsetting all sorts of things, such as the fact that, well, anything you're building in Toronto in the high rise, you don't have to put parking in anymore. We're just going to have bicycle parking for it. So there's all these different offsets. Development fees serve a real purpose, and to eliminate them like this, or however much they're reducing, it's just coming straight out of the municipality's pocketbook. They cannot afford it, making them whole. Again, it's just the taxpayers paying up for developers. Why on earth cut the developer fees? It makes no sense.
Yeah, and I think the other side of this is that's one part of the challenge that they're going to have in terms of how they make everybody whole. The other part of this is it's great to have everybody on board. We heard Mayor Tory, day after the election here in Toronto saying, okay, yep, I'm going to use my new superpowers and we're going to get the housing thing juggernaut. Let's move it ahead. The probably the biggest player I would think in all of this, Sabrina, might be Minister McNaughton, just because we are going to need capacity in the various skilled trades. We're going to have to make sure that we've got people that are going to be able to pour the cement and drive the nails and build the frames of housing and all that stuff. Because right now we don't have enough workers to fulfill the promises of the province.
Yeah, I think that's always, front and center for the Ford government, or certainly they like to talk about that a bit. And they talk a lot about, removing red tape in that front too. But I think, where this is going to, maybe we'll see the most results is kind of this renegotiating with the feds right now that McNaughton is kind of taking the lead on when it comes to like our immigration program. So obviously Ontario is pushing for more control, on the number of people that are coming in, the type of skills that they're bringing with them. And so obviously, with this agenda, I think we can expect that will include, a lot of folks in the construction sector too. And obviously, when it comes to those unions, Ford has been maybe more friendly than we would expect, certainly compared to like other public sector worker unions. So I think that this is kind of all leading to that, because you can't just really, I think like it has to be like a multi-pronged approach, obviously. And so getting this, sweeping housing legislation, there's still a lot of questions of how they're going to actually, follow through on this. And then, of course, if it will actually help with the big issue, which is housing affordability. And from what I'm hearing from critics, is that it's not going to do much on that front, and certainly not anytime soon.
Well, yeah, that's a slow drip. There's no question about that in terms of how we bring that down. But there's so many other factors involved. Supply, of course, is the key, but interest rates, all of those other things, and then just the timing of the builds. So, I mean, I think to assume that just because we say we're going to build 100,000 units in the next in a year, there's not a chance we're doing that in the first couple of years, because this is going to have to ramp up. So expectations are really, Keith, going to have to be managed here.
Well, of course they are. I mean, I think we're going to look at the long 10-year goal at this. As you say, the first couple of years are going to be ramp up time. One of the other big aspects of this bill that didn't get a whole lot of attention this week is the massive reduction in powers for conservation authorities around Ontario. They're basically, going to have almost a zero role now in being able to defend lands that they think need defending. The province is basically directing them to look at all your lands and tell us what can be developed, because we want to develop it. I don't know. This is quite stunning. The conservation authorities play an amazing role in what they do in protecting our watersheds and our water sources, but all sorts of natural, resources, the whole ecosystem. It falls under their purview. And if there's buffer areas around where we're keeping housing from being developed because that land may not necessarily be itself particularly needed, it's needed as a corridor between these wild lands green lands that we're trying to protect. So reducing their role is, I know, again, they're seen as part of the red tape in the process of getting housing built. But I think there's areas we absolutely need red tape or processes to go through. And dealing with this, I know we just saw the case of, was it the mayor of Gravenhurst or Bracebridge and the Blandings Turtle, because he allowed a development. And people, so what? They, allow the development. No, we need to have the conservation authorities at least can raise the issue. They can't stop the development, but they can at least raise the issue and make sure people are aware of what we're doing if we're going to pave over this parking lot or pave over this paradise and put up a parking lot. We need to know, and they're the ones that do it. Taking away all their power and authority under this seems to be needlessly but on point, just needless, but on point, certainly for Doug Ford. But remember the video before he was elected telling those developers, we're going to open up that green belt for you. Oh, no, I don't. Okay, I won't do that. Well, this is essentially doing that.
Mm-hmm. Sabrina, I have talked about the federal inquiry into the Emergencies Act, and I think it's, quite frankly, a waste of a lot of time and oxygen, never mind media attention. It's prescribed. We have to do it. Okay, you do it. But we're not really learning anything new here, maybe on a granular level. But who's surprised to find out that OPP, Ottawa Police, RCMP, they don't really get along well in the sandbox when they have to cooperate with each other. So, okay, I get that. I think, all in all, I don't know what the thinking is in the Premier's office, though, in terms of refusing to testify under oath at this inquiry. All of a sudden, he's made it a way bigger story than it would have otherwise been. He's going to get up there and tell us, there was some confusion and we had a meeting, but we didn't attend the meeting, and here's why we didn't attend the meeting. And who the hell cares? At this point, I don't know that there's any fallout for him that's bad.
I mean, maybe he's now guaranteed himself, like everyone in the country watching his testimony, as potentially boring as it might actually be. But I think he's going to have a captive audience no matter what. I think maybe that's the only silver lining I can see out of it. Because, of course, now it's like, what does he have to say? And the line is now, what is he hiding? He's just given so much fuel to his critics. Even those that we might say are in, Ford's camp politically are upset that he won't testify. They think that he should take the stand and answer. And, we also saw some of these questions, which aren't, exactly hard hitting necessarily, I don't think like we need to imagine so much that the premier is going to say something ridiculous or unexpected when he's asked, details of why didn't you participate in this meeting? Those are kinds of questions that reporters have already been putting to him. I think, yeah, the political fallout of this, they're making a mountain out of a molehill. He should just quit fighting this. I do think that he will win his case. Obviously, they're going, him and then Solicitor General, now Deputy Premier Sylvia Jones, are legally fighting this summons in court. They're arguing parliamentary privilege, which I've seen a lot of critics, kind of scoff at because Ford is not in the House as often as they would like. And of course, parliamentary privilege, the argument is that you can't be away from Queen's Park. You have to do your legislative business. And so he can't, trek to Ottawa to testify. But, the experts that I've talked with, they do say that this is a, legal use of parliamentary privilege. And so Ford likely, will win the case. But, in terms of levers that we have to actually compel his testimony, I don't think there are any, but the political pressure on him is, bubbling over. And we have seen Ford pivot when he's faced with, backlash from the public. So it might just be a matter of time. I don't know if it's going to be as riveting as all this buildup is if he eventually does, decide to take the oath and answer some questions.
So I just want to get clarity on something from you guys, because, my when we talk about, summoning a former minister who is now in a different portfolio, wasn't there a time when, Keith, today you're the health minister, yesterday you were the attorney general, but as of today I can no longer question you around what you did as the attorney general because it's not your portfolio anymore. Now it's Sabrina's job. So anything that happened in there is up to Sabrina to answer for it. Wasn't that sort of the protocol?
I think that was the tradition or protocol, but I don't think it's set in, legal precedent. And they want, under this, they're using a subpoena because the premier and the deputy premier declined invitations to appear. So they're going to use the subpoena power. Using parliamentary privilege is sort of the Canadian equivalent available only to politicians of invoking the Fifth Amendment in the United States. And it just right away, remember Donald Trump once said, well, you only take the fifth if you're guilty. And of course, now he's taking the fifth. So it immediately just raises questions. Sabrina very rightly pointed out, what's he hiding? What has he got to hide? I mean, we've seen their answers in the House. Basically, it took them a while to get there, but it's a federal inquiry into a federal decision, and it has nothing to do with the province, and we don't direct the police, and that's the end of the story. You don't want us to direct the police, do you? He could just say that under oath, I guess, or in the testimony and just stick to his talking points. He also, again, invoking parliamentary privilege, I believe some of the testimony is being heard via Skype or Zoom calls. I'm sure his could have been done from the legislature, if necessary, from his office at Queen's Park. The parliamentary privilege extends like 40 days before the House sits and 40 days after something. So it's quite an expansive privilege, but to use it here seems needlessly excessive. And again, as you both point out, it just draws so much attention to it when seemingly they're just going to give those straight answers. I can see why Jones doesn't want to go in and say, explain how she said there was 1,500 OPP officers in Ottawa when there clearly weren't. But again, I misspoke. It's a simple, I misspoke, or we should have corrected that. These are not, shooting offenses sort of thing. It's them just trying to cover their ass. Why were they so missing in action at the time? And that's really what it comes down to. And while an awful lot of Ontarians, I think, Dave, are like, we're viewing this, oh my God, is this inquiry still going on? But I will pay interest now if the premier shows up. To the people in Ottawa who actually lived through this and went through this for those 3 weeks and change last winter, it's still very top of mind. And they were, some people, I know there's a lot of jokes about, mocking these people. Some people were really traumatized by this and had a really hell of a time. So they want to know where their premier was. Where was the provincial government during all of this? Couldn't you have at least stepped in and overseen and made sure that the police forces got along better? Somehow, I don't know what they could have done, but they would want to have answers from their premier as to where he was. Dave, back to your original point about the police, no surprise that the police forces at different levels don't get along. It's certainly not to those of us in Nova Scotia who watched, during the massacre 2 years ago, the RCMP didn't even tell the local police forces that this guy was going through Truro. He was headed to Halifax. They didn't tell the local. They have such disdain for the RCMP, for other levels of policing. And it's clear that the OPP clearly have the same disdain for the Ottawa police or, local police. It's just ridiculous. And to have this inquiry just confirming that really doesn't tell us anything, but it somehow never gets through the police community either, that they need to do a better job of actually just communicating with each other, top to bottom, especially during crises. And this, it started out as a protest, but after it starts going on week 2, week 3, you've got a situation that requires all hands communicating and dealing with each other, and they clearly were not. Or they would just look at their plan, oh, that's an idiot plan, we'll just do our thing. It's frightening in some aspects, but it's not at all surprising, and that's what's sad, is that they're not learning from these situations and making the next one where they at least have lines of communication set to go. They clearly don't. I
just keep going back to Justice Archie Campbell, right? You and I spent a lot of time covering that story, the Bernardo story and the fallout and what happened. And it was, exactly that we saw the whole thing play out, 30 years ago almost, right? When we look at the way the OPP, Niagara Police, Toronto Police were all singing from different hymnals as that investigation for Bernardo and Carla Homolka was going on. And we haven't learned anything since then. Where's the accountability on that stuff? Well, I mean, whether we needed the Emergency Act to me is just like...
Oh, it's almost irrelevant.
Completely.
Yeah, at this point. It's procedure. It has to be done, but it's not revealing to us what we don't know. One of the saddest things here in the testimony, they're having the Mass Casualty Commission here in Nova Scotia into that mass shooting situation. And we knew at the time, and the Mounties even said in interviews at the time, that they were very afraid of walking into this live shooting situation that went on for over 12 hours because of what had happened in Moncton a couple of years earlier when the fellow walked down the street and shot, believe it was 7 Mounties. Turned out, when they're asked on the stand during the inquiry, okay, how many of you have you read the report into the Moncton situation that so terrified you? No. Mm-hmm. Did you read the executive summary? I glanced at it. They didn't even, so their own report into the very event they're citing as the fear motivator that was holding them back in this situation, none of their bosses had even read the damn report. So what is the good of this inquiry? Is it going to just, in the end, what's the report going to get read by? The executive summary will get looked at by the media, and there'll be a few columns written about it, and then it's just off into the netherworld, isn't it? It's a huge waste of time and money, although the people in the city of Ottawa deserve to know what happened, and they should have at least the premier there to say what his government did or did not do and why.
Let me just loop back on our health minister, who was at the center of this storm during the convoy. And, you point out that, you miscommunicated. Sabrina, at what point is the health minister beyond the point of no return? At some point, she's beyond being tone deaf when it comes to assessing the state of healthcare in this province. And it's not just in this province. It's across the country we're seeing it. So it's not particular to Ontario. But I imagine that she would get a whole lot more credit for taking some leadership and saying, we're in the middle of a crisis here, people, and we need to act now. And here's how we're going to do it. She has been silent, like next to nothing coming from her on the state of healthcare since she was elected in the spring. There's been nothing there that has given, can't imagine anybody in the healthcare sector is thinking, she's our champion.
Yeah. Sylvia Jones is someone, obviously she's had other positions in cabinet. I think maybe the sense is that she could work on her bedside manner a little bit, but you're right. We haven't heard from her at all. And, this week the government confirmed that she's at home following protocol because she tested positive for COVID. So, okay, I guess fair enough, but her absence is definitely notable, especially because now, she's being summoned to testify in this Emergencies Act inquiry for her position as Solicitor General. On that, the more, surprising thing to your earlier point is that we're not even hearing from the current Solicitor General or Attorney General, who also have a part in this testimony. And obviously that's where a lot of the bureaucrats and the documents that have already, been given over to the inquiry are coming from too. And so it's interesting where the opposition is hammering the government on this in question period. And it's like the House Leader, Paul Calandra, answering, even though, the other ministers are in the House and could certainly respond to this. So I think, okay, Jones is at home, after testing positive for COVID, fair enough. But I think that she's had her time, she's had time to read the briefing books. And sooner or later, especially, with this looming fall flu season, another wave of COVID, potentially, hospitals just on the brink still, I think that she's going to have to come up and she's going to have to take some accountability for the current situation.
Well, it's hard to.
But I think she's past it, Keith. I don't think she can salvage this now and say that, oh, you know what? It wasn't a crisis in June, but now it is in October.
There's no way. They can't admit it was a crisis because they've been in the government for over 4 years and twice elected. It's their crisis if it is one. You can't just say it's all the most corrupt liberal government in history and it's all their fault that we're here now. Well, you've had 4 years plus now to be dealing with this, and your health minister basically is putting her head in the sand. It's hard to deny there's a crisis, when the reality is there's a crisis, and it's coming from the hospital.
Hallway health care.
Oh, we're way beyond
that.
You can get a hallway spot? Lucky you. Seriously, it's gotten so far beyond that. And for them to, politically, they just will not admit it. So I don't think she's in any danger politically of being removed as the minister, because she's doing what she's told to do, which is stay low, never admit this is a crisis, and just use those talking points. We're doing all we can to get more nurses in. We're working with the Nurse Association, get them online quicker, bringing in foreign trained nurses and doctors. We're doing everything we can do. That's going to be their message. And there's no way they're going to have her take questions, because every question is going to be, do you not think this is a crisis? How would you describe it then if it's not a crisis? And how are you not responsible for it after you've been in the government? You're now in your second term. So I think there's all these reasons for them to just keep her out of the limelight. And quite frankly, there's so much going on that I don't think it hurts them politically in the long run. I think they're able to get away with this. People are just, they're fraught with it, and they're not saying, where's my health minister on this? I just don't see them saying it.
In stage one, we say nothing is going to happen.
Stage two, we say something may be going to happen, but we should do nothing about it.
In stage three, we say that maybe we should do something about it, but there's nothing we can do.
Stage four, we say maybe there was something we could have done, but it's too late now.
We've tried nothing, and we're all out of ideas.
I'm just dying to use those drops every week, so there we go. All right, that'll do it for us this week. It's On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. I'm Dave Trafford with Keith Leslie and Sabrina Nanji. You know what? Give us a comment, rate us on Apple, wherever you listen to the show. Love to hear from you. And if you got a thought or a view on what we should be talking about, by all means, pass it along. It's On the Ledge for Story Studio Network.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.